G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I thought it might be a good day for shooting a mad scientist video. You see, not only am I doing the final phases of resuscitating six 6-volt 225 amp hour cells out of a golf cart. They've been in service for 3 years as far as I know. And I started off charging them with a 70-watt solar panel. I've now got a 30-watt solar panel because they were too tender. That means as soon as you applied the current, their voltage would rise. And you're not really supposed to get your batteries above 15.3 volts. So I've been sort of trying to keep them in the high 14s by reducing the amount of current going into them. And that means that I got sufficiently motivated as to pull this thing off the tower of power, because it was only making maybe 5 watts at 19 volts, and that was, dependent on the diodes to stop the current from the other solar panels from being fed back into it, which I think may have been happening because that's a 30-watt gallium arsenide, that's a 30-watt silicon, that's a 30-watt gallium arsenide, and that old silicon thing was up there where that 70-watt silicon was. And I know the 70-watt silicon panel was actually putting out 50 watts through the amp meter and the multimeter going into the used second-hand discarded golf cart batteries. And when that old 30-year-old silicon panel was where the 70-watt one is, that rig was lucky to show 40 watts going into the batteries, and at the moment it's pumping out 105 watts, 6.9 amps at 14.5 volts kind of thing, middle of the day, blue sky. So I'm pretty happy with that. But yeah, what it means is that old panel was just sucking current. It wasn't producing anything. It was worse than an ornament. So now I've got 6.9 amps coming out of the tower of power. I've had the opportunity, while doing the resuscitation charging on the quote newbies, to check and see how these batteries respond to actually having more than enough current to recharge them from the previous duty cycle. After they've experienced a fairly considerable amount of neglect, and once upon a time this little battery hutch used to have a generator inside it. So if it was wet weather, the generator was likely to be running, and therefore this little pyramid was full of warm, hot air. So it didn't suffer too badly from the kind of damp, moist, humid atmospheric conditions which allow corrosion to occur, particularly as, sadly enough, my electric pyramid is in fact situated on a spring. That's why you can see the algae starting to die where there was water all last week. You live and you learn. And of course, these days, the generator with its exhaust gas recovery turbine is too big to fit in the old pyramid, where the old two-stroke cheap Chinese generator ran pretty successfully, where according to the logbook, that there engine actually ran from April 2006 to December 2012, and during that time 4,475 hours and 2 minutes were spent running inside the electric pyramid with the doors shut. And after extensive experimentation, to find the best particular shape of condenser. I actually pretty much cornered the market on refined, used, second-hand, two-stroke oil. But the new generator won't fit in the old enclosure. Therefore, thus and because, it has its own little hutch. And it's been running there for 2,500 hours. And I just replaced its fuel hose for the second time with a spare length taken from an old, used, failed catapult rubber. Now, because I'm just a little bit slack, and I've recorded the dates and the start and stop times, but I haven't actually gone in there and worked out how long the unit's been running. Since the 2004 hours 57 minute mark, which was on the 23rd of the 8th, 2016. So that's kind of like 2 months ago. So we might fairly say we're up around the 2,200 hour mark. And here's the catapult rubber where it failed at the carburetor end due to the vibration, where it had been since March 2015, at which time it was replacing the one that came with the engine, which had done 991 hours 34 minutes. See what logging things is good for? If it wasn't for a logbook, how else could I prove to you that a mad scientist hillbilly's home cobbled repair to a fuel line on a Chinese generator will actually run for 30% longer than the original hose as fitted by the manufacturer? So therefore, thus and because, when I go fiddle buggering around with battery resuscitation, I tend to write shit down and log it as well. Otherwise you can't, well, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, you know? And how can you measure it if you don't know what it was last time? 14.04 volts, 1.55 amps. That would be because we're starting to get some cloudiness of the sky. Right, so here we see the resuscitation chart on the quote new 6-volt cells. As I explained in an earlier movie, I have grouped them according, as I was saying, according to their voltage on acceptance. As I also mentioned, this particular bunch, 3 of the cells have been doped with extra acid added, which is why it's got this high voltage, and 1.275, 1.275 and 1.26 specific gravities. And I've been logging how much power has been going in with what panels, and we finally came to the situation this morning where 12.6 volts resting yesterday morning, and this morning 12.76 volts, 12.76 volts, 12.83 volts, 12.84 volts, 12.76 volts resting in the morning. Previous morning was 12.78, and this morning was 12.76. So what these batteries are telling me is that they're pretty much charged up as much as they can cope with, and what they would like to have is a bit of a discharge load. And I've got a choice between messing around with them to try and see just how much more I can fit in. Bank 1 has had 23.75 amp hours go in. Bank 2, which as I said has been battery doped, it's had 19 amp hours go in. Bank 3, which is over there under charge, it had 29.9 amp hours go in as of yesterday, and it's been on there since 1 o'clock. So it's had nearly 3 amp hours more go in there. So to be honest, what I think is likely to happen is tomorrow I'm going to spend the whole day swapping out everything in the pyramid for the batteries that I've just spent 8 days cuddling up to and getting really intimate and personal with, learning all of their voltage and amperage likes and dislikes and what they can cope with. And I've also been having the fun of checking the response of the batteries that were being basically undercharged and over discharged and occasionally hit with petrol charges from the generator. So after living a whole life where they thought 20 amp hours in a day was a good day, 36 amp hours went in. 20 amp hours came out. 5.59 amp hours went in, and then we had a 7-hour petrol charge. 29.3 amp hours went in, 18 came out. 40 amp hours went in. And then last night I did get a bit obsessive and I monitored the battery voltage, and it was 12.7 when I hit it with a massive 2 amp load. The funny thing is, the older and sadder your batteries are, the less amps it seems to take to run your house. So 24 watts was running a light, a radio, and a phone charger. And we rapidly came down to 12 volts, and then we stayed at 12 volts for 1, 2, 3 hours, went down to 11.9 volts, and 9.4 amp hours came out of those ancient batteries that have been so misused. This morning at 0640, because daylight saving happened, different story, I hate it, after turning the light and the radio on, 12.2 volts minus 1.5 amps. 20 minutes later, minus 1.5 amps, 11.9. An hour after that, 3.09 amps coming in from the panel, 12.6 volts. So I paid a bit of attention. It wasn't until 10:15 that the phone chargers went off. So by that time, 9 amp hours had gone in, and the entire dark cycle had used 13.6 amp hours. And by 10:45, whoops, no, earlier than that. Yeah, 10:07, 6.9 amp hours. 10:07, 7.25 amp hours. Occasionally you get to see the 7.25, not all the time. And behold, by 11 o'clock in the morning, when 15.827 amp hours had gone back into the batteries after 13.6 amp hours had come out, we hit the absorb charge. That's when no more unlimited current can go in there. So storage efficiency is 83.65%. That's surprising. Until we hit float charge, the reported charge amount going in was believable. Battery voltage dropped and then went back up again. And I noticed a bit of an anomaly that went on for about an hour, wherein if you believed what the charge controller said had gone into the battery, then it was getting current rates in the order of 3 times what the panels were actually able to produce. In the next hour, everything had kind of calmed down and gone back to reality. But as you can see, at the moment, Warbles on a Lot is deeply into mad scientist mode. So, cheers. And as they say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So log everything. Ciao.